Okay, today's Monday, September 17th, and we are diving right back into our math workbook. We haven't talked about a new math lesson in a couple days, but today we're starting right up with EM Lesson 1.11, Module 1, Lesson 11. And today's math lesson is about using what you know about place value, which you know a lot about, and also area models to help you multiply decimals. Give me a thumbs up if you used area models before in 4th grade. No worries if you're kind of like, ooh, I kind of remember, but I also don't really remember what that is. We'll talk about it today. By the end of today, even if you've never heard of area models, my goal is that you will be confident and a pro at using area models. They're way easier than they sound. Okay. So the directions tell us to solve by drawing discs on a place value chart. Another word for discs is just dots, okay? That's why you set yourself up with a place value chart already. Then it says write an equation and then express the product in standard form. What's a product? What's a product, Raj?
The answer to a multiplication equation.
Very good. So every time you see the word product, it just means the answer to a multiplication problem, okay? So let's take a look at this first example. It says 2 copies of 4/10. Okay, well, here's how you draw it on a place value chart. If I start out with 4/10, that looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you agree that that's 4/10? Yes. Go ahead and draw 4/10 in your place value chart. Now if I want 2 copies of that, I have to take those 4/10 and make a copy. Do you agree that now I have 2 sets of 4/10? 2 copies of 4/10? Do you agree?
Yes.
Okay, then I'm done. So then what's my final answer? How many tenths do I have altogether? 8 tenths. Okay, but if I have to write an equation, it would look like this. 2 copies of 4/10 equals 8 tenths. And there I have my product in standard form. Does that make sense? Go ahead and write your equation and your product in standard form. Let's take a look at this next example. It's telling me to make 4 groups of 5/100ths. So let's make 5/100ths first. That's 5 dots, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the hundredths column. But how many groups of that do I need?
4.
4. How many groups have I drawn so far?
1.
1. Let's draw a second group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 2 groups. Let's add a third group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 3 groups. 3, 4, 5. Now you can see I have 4 groups of 5/100ths. Here's my first group. Here's my second group, here's my third group, and here's my fourth group. All together now, how many hundredths do I have? 20 hundredths. That's the same as how many tenths?
20.
Because I can regroup those 20 hundredths to become 2 tenths. So I know that my final answer will be 2 tenths. But again, I need to write an equation. If I'm making 4 groups of something, how many copies of it am I making? If I need 4 groups of it, how many copies did I make? 4. So it's 4 copies. Multiplication just means you're making copies of something. So rather than say 4 times, we could say 4 copies of, or 4 groups of. And then what am I making 4 copies of?
5 tenths.
5 whats?
10 tenths.
Are you sure? 5/100ths. Be careful. Okay. And what was my answer in standard form? 2 tenths. Very good. Okay. So this slide, or your notes that we just took, are an example of how to use what you know about place value to multiply decimals. See how we're using a place value chart? That's very much using what we know about place value to multiply decimals. How do you find the area of a rectangle? Let's say I have this rectangle right here in black. How can I find the area of this rectangle? Lydia? I can measure the length by the width. So in order to find this, I would find 3 times 4, which we know is 12. Yes? Okay. How can I find the area of this rectangle? Again, I need to multiply the length times the width, or 10 times 25, or 250. Yes? Okay. How can I find the area of this rectangle? What equation would I use to find the area of this rectangle? Brigitte? 4 times 6.79. Very good. So now the directions say draw an area model. Remember, that's just a rectangle, and we're going to find the area of it. a model of which we're going to find the area. That's why it's called an area model. To find the sum of the partial products. Wait a second. What's a product again? What's a product, Luke? The answer to a multiplication problem. But now I have the word partial in front of it. If I only have part of something, is it the whole thing? No, it's only a part of it. So a partial product means a part of the whole product. Okay? These are fancy math words, but when you take them apart, are they that complicated? No. Then it says use the sum. Wait, what's a sum again? If a product is the answer to a multiplication question, what's a sum? Shivani? The answer to an addition problem. Very good. So we're going to use the sum. We're going to add up all the partial products, the different parts of the product, to find the whole product. Does that make sense? To evaluate each expression. When you talk about evaluate, that just means solve, and expression means equation. So we're going to use an area model to find parts of the product. We're going to add up all those parts to find the sum to solve the equation. Make sense? The problem we're going to be working on right now is 4 times 6.79. Now, in your notebook, go ahead and draw yourself a rectangle because that's the beginning of any area model. And on one side, you're going to write 4 because that's the length of this side here. Okay. Now, this other side is 6.79. But we're going to divide it up. Do you agree that 6.79 is the same as 6 ones plus 7 tenths plus 9 hundredths? Very good. Now I'm going to find the area of each section or each part of the rectangle. Okay. How do I find the area of this red part? Well, what's this distance here, everyone? 4. What's the distance here? 4 times 6, but what's the units? 4 copies of 6 ones. So what's the answer? 24 what's? Ones. Okay. So our partial product there is 24. Next, let's find the area of this blue part. What's the length over here?
4.
Do you see how it's the same as this length here, which is 4? Now what about the width? How wide is it now? 7 what's though? What's the units? Okay, 7 tenths. If I make 4 copies of 7 tenths, how many tenths do I have? 28 what's? 28 tenths. Okay. How do I write 28 tenths in standard form? Well, I just write the number 28, and I think, well, I need the 8 to be in the what's place? Tenths place. So the decimal point needs to be right here in order for that to be in the 8 tenths place. Very nice. Moving on to the black portion of our rectangle. What is the edge, this edge right here? How much? 4. Very good. And then across the top this time it's 9. 9 what? Hundredths. If I make 4 copies of 9 hundredths, how many hundredths do I have? 36 hundredths. It's super important to write the units every time. Why do you think it's super important to write the units every time? Samar?
Because if you don't write the units, it's like it could be any number.
If I don't write 36 hundredths, could I think it's 36 ones?
Yeah.
Could I write 36 tenths?
Yeah.
Would that be correct? It needs to be 36 hundredths. Let's write it in standard form. So I can write 36, and now I know I need the 6 to be in what place value? Hundredths. So I know the decimal point needs to go right here for the 6 to be in the hundredths place. Down here, the 24, the 2.8, and the 0.36 are all partial products because they're part of the whole product. In order to find the whole product, I have to add up the red part plus the blue part plus the black part to get the area of the whole rectangle. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Luckily, we know how to use standard algorithm to add that up. After I add it all up, I can find out that my total product is 27 and 16 hundredths.